If you want to turn the channel, go ahead, fool. Turn the channel.
We've seen midgets grow. Mandada basata. I don't make this stuff up.
Warlocks are enemies of God.
A lot of people who go into prison straight, and when they come out, they're gay.
Science is interesting, and if you don't agree, you can fuck off.
Well, I'm not too righteous, but on the other hand, I think you're a bit of a dingaling.
If you want to learn something about God, shut your mouth and listen to me for a minute.
Welcome to the relaunch of the AxPx podcast. I am Sean DeRager, and glad to be back. I honestly didn't think I would ever be bringing this back. And for multiple reasons. I didn't really think the interest was there. I just didn't really, wasn't in the right headspace for a while, I guess. It's been, the last episode that I posted was in February of 2014, which is crazy. Trying to think exactly what was going on back then, but I was wrestling with all this stuff, doing this podcast, trying to be, in a better place. The podcast really did help in a therapeutic sense as I was going through this journey, this faith journey, and it really did help a lot. It was kind of me just talking to a microphone, hashing things out with Joey Avalos and all the guests that have came on the show. So it really did help me. So I don't know if at the time it kind of came to the close where I felt like I didn't really have anything else to say. Felt like we were just going to start kind of retreading previous ground. But also, like, other things that happened was my company started going through some layoffs and things like that. So I was getting stressed going through all that. And I came out the other side. I actually work close to home now, which is great. But all that was going on, I think just kind of, it was easy just to kind of put the AxPx aside. And I really didn't think that I was going to be bringing it back. But I got a lot of, throughout this last, it's been like a year and a half, got a lot of kind of Facebook messages on the AxPx Facebook page, and some emails came in where, where people had heard the show and really dug it and were asking if I was going to hopefully bring it back. And I've been mulling over this for a good year now. And I think the time is right for me to bring it back. I'm starting to get interested in exploring this stuff again. I do have another podcast that actually took off and is doing, I can't believe how well it's doing, but it's called The Screamcast. And I probably have some Screamcast listeners checking this out today. But I'm excited to kind of bring this back. I want to bring this back in more of an entertaining fashion, hopefully. Less, less melancholy, I think we try to keep the other shows interesting. But I think now we're going to be doing basically an interview-style podcast. I don't think there's going to be any topics, specific topics, going to be mostly about the guest and their experiences. So that's kind of the direction that I'm taking the AxPx podcast. I did speak to Joey Avalos about coming back here and there, and he's definitely interested. He may not operate in a co-host, as the co-host like he had been, but he's definitely, still, he's one of my, good friends, and he'll be involved, I'm sure. So, today we're going to be talking to Blake Collier. He has a website. Here's some cool kind of analysis on some horror movies, and I really responded to those. And so I figured, what the hell, it's October, we'll start things off and talk to him. So that's coming up here in just a little bit, but I wanted to kind of, set the stage for the show moving forward here. It's weird that I'm doing this in October. I don't know when I first started the podcast, but October is always a weird month for me. And I was thinking about bringing this podcast back. It's been mulling over it for the past few weeks and kind of getting into a good spot. And then a week after I decided to kind of bring this back, my neighbor passed away. And he was in the military and really cool guy, and tragically died in a cargo plane crash. And it's just weird how October has turned into this celebratory month of Halloween, horror movies. I love October. It's my birthday month. Just celebrated my 38th birthday, which is really odd to say that number. But October's kind of, turned into this whole different thing. And now the reason why I first started the podcast was me dealing kind of in a way with me challenging my view of God and faith and Christianity based on the frustrations of my brother-in-law passing away. And he had passed away in October of 2006, I want to say. So all these memories and all this stuff comes up every October now since then. And then to have my neighbor pass away was a whole other thing. It's like, here we go again, you know. But I don't want to, I guess, dwell on it. It is tragic, and it does open up a Pandora's box of questions, you know, about suffering and why God allows things like this to happen to people, and why he, you know, now we got 3 young, beautiful kids without their father, and why stuff like this happens. So I guess it's ripe for me to bring back the podcast here and explore these things further. I guess I'm motivated to kind of be looking into this again. Because I think for a while I just haven't given a shit, so it's been hard for me to get motivated to bring this podcast back in any reasonable sense. But anyway, I think we're good. I think it's time to bring this back. So that's all I got to say. Let's jump into the show today. I'm really excited about the show, about our guest, having Blake come on. And I've been mulling around doing the music thing again. But I was running the other day, and like in a row, these 2 songs came on, and I was like, yeah, we're going to bring back the music. We'll do the music. You know what, skip through the music if you don't like it. But for me, I think these bands and the stuff that I play will hopefully enhance, if you listen to it all the way through, enhance the conversation that's about to happen. So we'll jump into this. We're talking to Blake Collier right after this. But first, this is Maritime from their 2007 album Heresy and the Hotel Choir. This song is called For Science Fiction. You're listening to the AxPx podcast.
Children get scarred, turning guilty faces and tattoos on their arms. We are always changing into naked clothes and time. We all fear a different devil. Freaks come out at night. Freaks come on forever in the black and white. And I wanna thank science fiction, or the benediction and the contradiction. All our souls are saved. I want to thank God. Lords and ladies run underneath the bunker. Prediction fell on the gun. We are full of anger, but ghosts have our steady lives. Cannot get enough of our choking, hypnotized. Now we're all on TV in the black and white. And I wanna thank God for the science fiction, for the benediction and the contradiction, that all our souls are saved. And I wanna thank God for the science fiction, for the benediction and contradictions, and all our souls are saved. I wanna thank God for the science fiction, for the benediction and contradictions, and all our souls are saved. And I wanna
So for this re-inaugural podcast, our first guest, I got to know through my other podcast, the Screamcast. Blake Collier is a listener, and I got of that show, and we started just chatting, I think, on Twitter and things like that. And through some conversations, I found out that Blake, you're a Christian, but you love horror movies and things like that. So I got the feeling, the vibe that you're a little bit different from some of the mainstream, I guess, Christianity we run into. But Blake, welcome to the my voice cracked. Welcome to the season 3, episode 1, as we're calling it, of the AxPx.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. I figured, it's October. We're watching a lot of scary movies. I'm always watching scary movies for the Screamcast, but I try to kick it up a notch in October. But this October's been a little bit different because there was a recent death in our neighborhood. A neighbor of mine died, so that's been hanging over everything. And then October is when if you listen to the first episode of the podcast, it's when I first started this up. October was when my brother-in-law died as well. So it's like
I seem to remember a little bit about that.
My favorite month of the year is also my birthday month. It has been kind of clouded by death, in like real life. So it kind of makes the whole fun of horror movies and everything. It's just a little odd. And this year, I think with a recent death, spilled water on my keyboard.
It's a little bittersweet.
With the reason, it's bittersweet, and it hasn't really felt like a normal October. But but I'm slowly easing into it, and my kids are asking me about decorating the house and everything. So we'll probably do that.
That's awesome.
Probably do that soon. So anyway, the reason why you caught my attention for this podcast was you had started writing these reviews with a kind of a Christian twist on horror movies. And the first one you wrote on was Martyrs. And this is a 2008 film, and it's a French film, and it's kind of ushered in there's these kind of like this new wave French horror, right? There's Martyrs, there's High Tension.
Yes.
There's a couple others with these filmmakers, and they're kind of set apart because they're so brutal. Is there another one, Inside? Is that another one of those French ones?
Yes.
Just splattery.
Just
hardcore,
violent.
Brutal.
And
so when I saw that you were taking on Martyrs, I was like, holy shit! Like, I got to read this. And we'll get into more on your kind of deconstruction of these films in a bit, but that sparked my interest.
Okay.
So, so I was like, man, I gotta contact Blake and get Blake on the show and just have a conversation about the stuff. But yeah, you strike me as someone who has faith, but you are also very open to the world around you and things like that. I know when I asked you to come on, you asked, is this you sent me a text or whatever messenger on Facebook, is this a drinking? Can I drink podcast? And I was like, hell yeah, you can drink if you want. So, I poured myself a little glass of some cognac. It's a cheap cognac.
Nice.
I'm drinking here. Where do you,
I've got a nice Ommegang Brewery 3 Philosophers. Ooh. So a quad. Going heavy tonight. So
wow, what's the alcohol rating on that sucker?
It's 9.7.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a let's see, I believe it's 1 pint. So
oh man, that'll watch out.
That'll tie off the evening.
Yeah, I remember there's a brewery out here in California somewhere. I think it's Southern California. It's called Lost Abbey. Have you heard of them?
I have, yes.
And they're specializing in like Belgian ales, and the first one I ever had was like a 10%, and it was called Damnation Ale.
Yes,
and I like theirs because they're, it's the Lost Abbey. It has this like kind of religious undertone to their beers, which was a lot of fun. But I didn't realize the alcohol content on it when I had a pint, and it was like a Wednesday night. And I had to be up and be at work the next day, and I was groggy, like super groggy the next day. And,
no kidding.
Kind of
No kidding.
knocked me out a little bit, but I've learned since how to pace myself with those ones. So
yeah, for sure. That's a one beer for the night kind of beer right there. So
right, yeah. And I didn't realize that I was drinking it like a Guinness.
Oh man, good lord.
Yeah, which I had a Guinness last night. I went to this Irish pub.
I saw your picture of that. That
place
looks
was amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell it's a good Irish pub when you have to try the corned beef and cabbage. Yeah, whenever I go to an Irish pub, that's like the first thing I try. Get a Guinness and then try the corned beef and cabbage and see how that is. If that's super good, you know, you're in a good spot. And then I move down the menu and try the other kind of authentic things.
That's awesome. That's my kind of eating right there.
Yeah, heck yeah. So I wanted to ask you to start things off with just a kind of about your background with Christianity and your faith. Using Cliff Notes, how did you get to where you're at today? Like, what's your, I guess, outlook on your faith and Christianity and Jesus now, and how has that changed, I guess? Okay,
so I was raised in a Christian home, a very good Christian home. Raised in a church that we didn't have any, issues. There's no malcontent going on there or anything like that. It's a good church, good people that went there. I was one of those kids, you back in those days, you kind of look at, being a Christian as ritual. So it's like, I'm a Christian because I go to church every Sunday. I go to youth group every Sunday night. I go to church every Wednesday, so forth, so on. So it's more like what you do is what makes you a Christian. And so if I were to say if I was actually a believer, like I actually believe the truth claims, I'm not sure I did, and I'm not sure I really did until probably late high school or early college, when I started reading a bunch of different books, C.S. Lewis, Peter Kreeft, who's a Catholic philosopher from Boston College, a few people like that, that I kind of latched onto, and it started making sense to me in a lot of ways. Now, I was still very much a legalist, someone who, was all about living up to the rules, like the law, this whole idea, right. You have to be good in order to go to heaven, and was that way for quite a while, and very hardcore Republican, very kind of snippy with teachers and kind of talked back and, stuff like that. So I was very much caught up in the kind of legalist mentality. Skip ahead to after grad school, came back to where I was raised and started going to a college program at a Presbyterian church in Amarillo, Texas, which is near where I live. And the concepts of grace and mercy were kind of sprung on me. And I've always known about them, but I don't think I ever really understood them. And so the concept that, it's not about what you do, it's about what Christ did for you. That no matter how shitty you are as a person or how good you are as a person, it doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it's Christ, what he did on my behalf is kind of the where your faith is placed. So that was a freeing conceptual revolution for me. Just this idea that I no longer have to be this facade of a good person. I can show myself, I can be transparent with people. I can say, I've got a lot of jacked up stuff in my life going on. And in theory, now in practice it's a little different, but in theory, like people, you can tell that to people and they can show compassion and they can show mercy. It's not always the case. There's a lot of churches, a lot of Christians that will kind of throw it back in your face. You kind of have to expect that. We're still human at the same time. So the long story short is, I've kind of gone from nominal Christian, someone who just kind of took on the name, to a legalist, to someone who would be very hardcore Calvinist, to someone who is probably more Lutheran, Anglican, High Church. I appreciate the liturgy, and I get the way I view liturgy is the idea that I can say these creeds and these words of affirmation and believe them, and yet I don't have to be original. I don't have to force myself to constantly being pushing like the boundaries of explaining my faith. I can just go and say the Apostles' Creed. I believe that. I affirm it. I speak it, and that is what I base my life on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting that these churches, like the Lutheran churches, there's the UCC, United Church. I think it's United Church of Christ.
Yes. I believe that's right.
And there's some other ones. I mean, it's been a while since I've been in this mindset, people. So you gotta give me some grace here.
Yeah, definitely.
But they're all the more you see them as the more, like when I was in the more contemporary Christian, the more charismatic Christian circles.
Yes.
They look upon it like Lutherans and everything. It's like, oh, stuffy and everything, which, depending on your personality, yeah, it can be. But I find that these churches are very much more open to social issues, talking about more social and political issues, and leaning, more to the liberal side of things, and actually practicing what you can call true grace.
Yes.
And that became more apparent to me. Part of my, if you've listened to the show, I'm gonna get a lot of new listeners on the show, but if you've listened to past shows, you know that in the past, my main frustration with the church and the churches I was going to, the people I was surrounding myself with, came out of the whole gay marriage argument,
Yes.
and
Okay.
just me sticking up for my friends who are gay, my friends who want to get married, and saying, hey, that I'm totally fine with that, as a quote unquote believer. And then getting all this pushback that I really wasn't ready for, because I figured this is something that Jesus would do if you read the New Testament and read what Jesus actually says in his teachings, not Paul, not the other apostles in later books, but what Jesus actually said and stood for. I don't think he'd have any problem with it. It would be a non-issue. So all that pushback, and then finding churches like the United Church of Christ. I visited one in Brea. Was like crying on the way home. I was so touched by that church.
Okay.
And the openness that they had to everyone who came in. There was gay couples in the pews, and they're in interacting and contributing to the church, and it was just a wonderful thing, and it's amazing.
That is good. That's good to see that.
Yeah, and so it's for what I always thought was more of the stuffy, denominations. I respect them a lot more than I think I ever did once that started happening. And then you see the closed mindedness of these more evangelical churches was hugely frustrating to me. So,
Well, and it's one thing. I mean, I'm sure you and I would disagree on some things, but
I think everyone disagrees on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you agree with anyone completely, something's wrong. But but it's the part of it for me is if we truly believe that the grace of Christ is enough to cover all sins and to cover all people and cover all the mistakes that we make, then we have to view people as people, regardless of their actions, regardless of, how we view their lives and how they're living them. We have to say, like, at the end of the day, if they put their faith in Christ, then they are our brothers and sisters, period. And there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. Because his death covered all those things. So like it's good to hear that from you that you've this church that you've been going to. Are you still going to it?
It's in Brea, so it's a bit of a
Okay.
drive. I've been there once, but I interact with a lot of the people. I mean, I went there once, and I can say that I'm lifelong friends with all the people I spent time with there.
That's good.
I immediately friended them, made friends with them on Facebook and everything, and we interact all the time, and it's amazing. And I was we were at the farmers market up in LA, that famous farmers market there, and I ran into two of the members, and it was just incredible because I hadn't seen them for like a year and a half, and we interacted that one time, and we just stood there and talked for a while, and it was really cool to see them and see their journey, and it's just an incredible thing. Like it really because I was very much gearing myself more towards agnostic atheist at the time. And once I saw that grace that those people in that church put forth everyone, like put on everyone, like grace covered everything. You were welcome. You were just another human being in their minds. And once I saw that, I was like, you know what? There's something more. Like I think that that God or whoever, like, there's a simplicity to it that I think that we as humans confuse and mess up, or we complicate it. We overcomplicate things.
Yes, we have tendency to do that a lot of times.
Yeah. So I would say, like right now, I'm a church going agnostic. And is what I say. I'm very open to a lot of things, but I did settle on a church close by here, close by my house, and I disagree with things that the pastor says, but overall, what they're doing in the community, and it's that mindset of, because they serve breakfast in the morning, and if you're passing by, you want some breakfast, come grab some breakfast,
That's awesome.
And that kind of thing was huge, and just how they approach the Bible and things is different. There's certain things that, I don't see eye to eye with the pastor and probably many of the congregation on, but there's that welcoming, aspect to them that I kind of, gravitated to, and so it's been good. It's been a good thing, and it's weird because 2-3 years ago, where I was at, you wouldn't hear me saying that going to church is a good thing, Yeah. Like I said, I still have a lot of questions. I'm still on this path for truth. What is truth? Who or what is God?
Yes.
Where does the Bible fit in all this? And other religious writings and things like that. I'm still on that journey very much, and I'm still very cynical, I think, towards religion, but I wouldn't distance myself from it. Like I've said, I think that we've overcomplicated something that should be purely simple. And if you're a Christ follower, that the message of grace is the simplest, clearest path that's been laid out. And for some reason, it's almost too simple, and people think that it's that, and they start looking at all these rules and regulations and excluding people, and and
it's folly to the wise.
Yeah,
as the Bible would put it.
Yeah. So, and we're gearing up for an election season, and I swear the past 4 or 5 years, the further and further away from the Republican spectrum I get. I used to be full on Republican.
You and me both.
And anymore, man, it's just a circus. That the Republican Party is a circus. Now. And I think
and Trump's not helping anything.
No, is it just me, or is this the zaniest lineup we've ever had?
It's the zaniest lineup that I can recall in my life.
And I think on both sides, like the Democratic, who we got, like, let's say we went from like Obama, who was very much kind of walking to a different tune. I didn't vote for him at the time. But seeing him become president was a momentous occasion. It was history. And then now we got all these people running for president, and it's just not the same. You know?
Yeah.
Because I respected Obama, and I would hear his speeches, and his inaugural speech was a fantastic speech.
Yes, it was.
And you're not going to hear anything like that from any of these people, from our next president.
The one person I would have voted for, possibly, is not running. So, and that would have been Elizabeth Warren. So,
okay.
And not that I agree with her on everything, but I found that she was at least thoughtful in how she approached her ideas.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's not. You're never going to find a candidate that's you're going to agree with 100%. But it's
exactly.
like, can this person possibly like maybe balance a budget?
Exactly.
Do they inspire, or are they gonna, be a leader, And I haven't seen that. I voted Libertarian last time around.
Okay.
Nice. Gary Johnson? Gary Anderson?
Okay. Yeah. I remember that name. I think that's right. That sounds right.
Libertarian?
Mm-hmm. I can't honestly say I've voted in the last 2 elections. I think I wrote in somebody on the first election of Obama. And then I just didn't vote the last time. So,
how dare you?
Yes, I am apathetic politically. So, yeah, I mean it's insane, and the scary part for me coming from kind of, and I, as much as I hate the terminology, I would consider myself evangelical because I do fit within the constraints of the doctrines and the general belief systems that kind of describe evangelicals, but I hate the term because there's so much baggage.
There is another church. There's the evangelical Lutherans, yes, which are very much in line with the more liberal line of things,
yes.
and the quote unquote normal evangelicals, I don't know, hate that there's the evangelical Lutherans.
Well, and it's. I've got friends in a lot of those different denominations, like the liberal and the conservative side, and it's not just like, a lot of it is the way people word criticism of the liberal denominations of each type of Christian branch of church. Mm-hmm. It's not. They use the political terminology, but a lot of times it's more of a doctrinal issue that's going on behind it. Like, so there's, the way Christians at least should view the church is that doctrine leads to proper action. Mm-hmm. So if we believe what is true about Christ, about his grace, about his mercy, about how Christ came to fulfill the law, so forth, so on, then that should enact right actions in us. Doesn't always work because we're still broken. Mm-hmm. And we tend to take on political terminology of whatever party we come from. And I think that's where a lot of the combat kind of lies, is in kind of the political, or kind of, you look at the polarization of politics today, that just kind of trickles down into churches and organizations and so forth. And they talk, like, sometimes they agree on a lot of things, and yet, politically speaking, they're using completely different words, mm-hmm. and they're using completely different types of language, and it's just like you're talking past each other. Even though we both believe in grace, it's just that we approach it politically differently. Right. So it's interesting. A book that I read quite a while ago is The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt, which I would recommend to you. It's quite interesting. I believe he is agnostic as well, but he's a political psychologist. So he deals with like why the liberal and conservative sides cannot get along, mm-hmm. and how that works out psychologically. That's because there's like 5 values that both sides hold to, but they hold to in varying different balances. It's not that they don't hold to these values. Both sides do. It's just that one side values 3 of the 5 more than the other 2, mm-hmm. and the other side holds the other 2 more. So it's just like that breakdown of political language that kind of derails a lot of things. That's not to say that there aren't disagreements that are actually legitimate, and but I think that a lot of that gets frustrated kind of in the politics of church and religion. So,
well, it's gonna be an interesting 2016.
Yes, it is.
That's all I gotta say. So,
no doubt.
Buckle up. I've been avoiding all of the debates and things like that. I'm gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna let it simmer. Kind of dip
it's
my
not
toe.
even 2016 yet.
Yeah, I'm not in that mind frame.
Watch-
I'm not in that mind frame yet. I can't think about that yet. But so where you're at, like, where do you know, who do you find that God is and Jesus is, like, historically? Like, because I know everyone kind of has a different perspective on who Jesus is depending on your background and everything. Like, do you consider him like a historical figure? Is it more of
symbolic
kind
of thing?
Do you care? For me, like, I think kind of like the teachings of Jesus kind of go above and beyond whether or not he was historical. Like, I look at it and I respond to it. I get emotional when I read that, when I read how he was. So for me, it doesn't matter because I think the principles are there. So that's where I'm at. So what about you? Like, who is Jesus to you?
Okay, so the way I look at it is, I think his teachings can be, if you're just looking at his teachings, that can be kind of detached from the historical question to some extent, because there are principles that you can hold on to. Now, whether or not we can fully, like, realize them in our lives or actualize them in our lives is a whole nother question. But I do, if I am to believe that I am saved by his grace, and that it is by his death and resurrection that I am saved, then on some level I do have to believe in the historical person. That I have to believe in the historical action of him coming to earth, being both God and man, living a perfect life, living up to the law, fulfilling the law, dying as an innocent, pegged as a criminal, hung on a cross, died. 3 days later, he rose again. I have to believe that historically, if the redemption and the salvation aspect of it actually has teeth. So I do believe in a historical Jesus. I do believe that the testaments of the Gospels preach to that, and that they are accurate. Now, we can talk about issues of, like, is every single word, like, perfect and everything like that. That's a whole nother question. But I do believe that what they're talking about, the witness that they speak of, is true.
Well, that's an interesting thing you bring up, because today we went to church, and our pastor we were going through the Beatitudes or whatever, and he was talking about the Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He had a name for those three Gospels. Do you know?
Yes.
Do you know what that name is?
I'm trying to think, because I've taken a few seminary classes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what that was.
Anyway, I should have jotted it down. So if you're listening to this and you have more knowledge about this, drop me a line. But he was talking about those three, because I think John's a whole other story. Because I think he was saying Mark was the first gospel written, and then either Luke and then Matthew. Luke and Matthew came afterwards, right? So Mark was the first one. The other two built upon the skeleton of what Mark laid out. And he looked at it as, and I don't think I've ever heard this preached from a pulpit that I've been to in a church like that I've been going to. Because for me, it's a little more. It's not charismatic, but it's not evangelical. It's a typical kind of non-denominational. But he said, look, it's like different witnesses. You go to a crime scene, you got 20 different people there. They're all going to give a different account, and that's kind of how he accounts for what people say inconsistencies and things that aren't don't line up. Certain one gospel says that Jesus was crucified or on one day, and then another gospel says it was another day or whatever. But all that kind of stuff. I mean, and for me, like, that stuff never really made a difference. For me, it's the overall message of the stories. But hearing that from a pulpit was great, because the last time I heard a pastor talk about the Bible, it was like this other guy was saying, the Bible's like a deck of cards. You remove one card, the whole deck falls down. So the Bible's inerrant. Every jot and tittle and everything is the inspired word of God.
Yep.
But I always thought that you present the Bible like that, you're gonna create some atheists.
And that's part of it.
If it doesn't stack up and people start, you start reading the Bible for what it is, and really start studying the Bible and looking at it with a skeptical perspective, you are gonna find inconsistencies. But for me, that was never a deal breaker, because I never ascribed to that.
Okay.
So is that how you approach the Bible? Because that weighs well.
I struggle, and here's where a lot of my own doubts come around. Like, I'm not real settled on how far I want to, go down that hole.
Be careful.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where I do believe it's the inspired word of God. I do believe that it's God breathed, which is the kind of the liturgical way of speaking of the inspiration of Scripture. I do believe that it is useful for both giving truth and maintaining truth within the life of the Christian and the life of the church. Where I'm unsure is, linguistically speaking, like, is every single word perfect, and is the translation perfect? No, I'm not sure. I don't have enough of a history of translation and oral history and how it's been passed down, and how these translations kind of approach kind of digging into the Hebrew and the Greek of the text. So I kind of basically just say, I believe it is inspired. I do believe that what it says is ultimately the truth, and that it maintains kind of the community and the unity of the church. So I'm okay with that. That's enough to where if I go further into seminary and I dig into that a little bit more, I might understand it a little bit better, but that's good for me right now.
Yeah.
And so it's, and, if you ask me about certain aspects of the Bible, like, there's going to be parts of it that I'll be like, I don't know if this is historical. I don't know. And on some of it, I'm kind of like you. Some stories, like Job, which is one of my favorite books in the Bible, it's disturbing to a lot of people. It is one of the most life-giving and helpful books for people who are suffering.
Yes.
That I've ever read. And it ultimately, in my mind, it doesn't matter if that's a historical book or not. It's the interaction between Job, his friends, and God that's important, and that is life-giving. So, there's a lot of give and take on that, and that's an issue that I don't know enough about. There are smarter people out there than me that could answer that with better knowledge. So.
Well, that kind of stuff is fascinating to me, and I wish I had the time. I mean, I wish I wasn't just fucking around when I was like in my 20s. I wish I was actually studying this stuff, because I think when I was in my 20s, I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was
sorry.
There's a lot of good people in Tulsa, but I was in Tulsa. If there wasn't those people there, it would have been hard, but. Really good music scene when I was down there. A lot of good bands and stuff. So we all bumped around a lot, and I was kind of caught up in that, and going to a lot of kind of charismatic churches, kind of searching on my own. But it was not. There's not a lot of digging into the scriptures. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people going to Bible school, going to Oral Roberts University, and going to Rhema Bible Training Center, but there wasn't like people who were going into like a seminary that were really digging into like the roots of the Bible. So I think when I was there, I was just I was trying to find trying to date girls and trying to go to as many concerts as I could and trying to make some money. And I wasn't really thinking about, this stuff. But now I'm like, hindsight, I wish I would have been studying this stuff because I don't have the time now, with kids and marriage and job and everything. It's an undertaking to really dig into this stuff that I'm becoming interested in the older I get. But I think, I'm at a place now where I'm really, I'm open to a lot more and also I'm happy with slowly kind of unpacking some things. And I'm at a way better place than I was. It's not a deck of cards being wrecked. You know what I mean?
Yes.
The more I learn is not necessarily going to make me go more the atheist route. I'm very much interested, and in this stuff, and I want to learn more. But I'm past the point of it kind of, I guess changing my overall perspective, because that's a shock, I guess. It's a shock when you go from one belief and then the carpet kind of gets pulled out from under you,
Yes, it is.
And you kind of have to go through a whole lot before you end up, at a place where you're okay with things. And I think I'm finally there.
It's for me, like what I usually tell people is it's interesting. Because I went to undergrad and I went to get my master's in history for both, and then philosophy, a minor in both. And it's one of those things like I love philosophy, but as much philosophy as I read during those years, I came to the conclusion that if you really want to, you can really make a sound and valid argument for pretty much any position.
Yes.
At the end of the day, that is not helpful to me at all.
Right.
And so I kind of threw it's not that I don't think it's useful and that it's not helpful in a lot of ways, but I said, is this where I find, the source of truth? No, not really, because it can be, interpreted however you want to interpret it. It's depending on man's reason to do that. Mm-hmm. Then I looked at, well, can I base it on my experience as, what I see and feel and then I was like, man, just looking at my life and how I've changed experience-wise and how I'd interpret my experiences has changed so often. Like, it's hard for me to really, bound something in kind of a changing atmosphere like that, and so I kind of put that to the side. I did a lot of things that I went through, as I was going through doubts and things like that. I was like, where is this solidness that I can kind of grasp, and I can cling to, and it's at the end of the day, you have to choose some kind of authority, and it, like Dawkins, people like that choose to base it on their reason, the human mind, science, so forth, and that's great. They're way smarter than I am, and I chose to base it on a book and a tradition, because not only is it on the whole unchanging. Because really, if you look at 2,000 years of historical kind of shifting of theology and stuff, it hasn't changed that much.
Yeah,
it's just the language has changed. Right. So, and so I kind of, grasped onto that. And yet there's parts of the Bible that I still don't like. They still challenge me. They still push me, and they still piss me off. And if it was up to me, I would not have this in the Bible because I don't like it, So, in my mind, part of growth as a human being and part of growth in faith is constantly just butting heads with that authority that you choose. And if the authority that you choose to kind of, grab onto is just telling you what you want to hear all the time, you're not going to grow.
Yeah.
And so that's why I hang on to Scripture. That's why I hang on to church tradition, the last 2,000 years of tradition. And because there's a lot of stuff there that I don't agree with and I don't want to agree with. And yet it keeps pulling me back in. And so that's a living kind of faith. That's a living kind of give and take. And I find it both enlivening and something to kind of just hang my hat on, and to know at the end of the day, like, yes, we can talk about what it looks like to be saved. We can talk about like the process of salvation, blah, 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 all these doctrinal things. But at the end of the day, I can say, you know, I am God's child because Christ died for me. And at the end of the day, that's enough.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, that's very freeing. And for someone who's wearied, that's a needed rest. So that's how I kind of sum up my faith right now.
Cool.
So.
And that's what's great. Like, you know, with faith and belief and everything, if you're open to things, like, that's what's great, is I think it's ever changing. You're going to learn more and grow more, and having that mindset, I think is way better than someone who's just, all right, I'm done learning more. I'm done. This is exactly where I'm going to be, you know, for the rest of my life. Here we go. You know,
Yep.
and I think if you're open yourself to growing and learning and open yourself to new things, I think that's a great mindset to have, no matter what you believe. So
Exactly.
So let's dive into when you started doing these kind of, they're not reviews, they are, you know, reflections on these horror films. And the first one you took on was a doozy, you know, taking on 2008's Martyrs. When did you start? When did you get the idea to do this, and what was your approach?
So when I first started actually writing about horror, was probably back in 2012. I kind of got hooked on it with a website called Mockingbird, mbird.com.
Okay.
They're housed in an Anglican church in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Nice.
They are largely Lutheran in their theology, very grace heavy, and I kind of found their website. I contacted them, said like I would love to try to write, because I hadn't really written for anyone at that point. Like, this was the beginning of, like, I'd been writing for a long time, but I'd never actually put stuff out for mass consumption. So I basically asked, like, you know, would there be a chance I could, you know, do an internship or write for you? And the head guy, David Zoll, who's the nicest guy you could possibly meet, said, like, come out to our conference in the fall and we'll talk about it. So I bought a ticket, went out to Charlottesville for their fall conference. I'm a guy who hates Christian conferences. I think they are just wearying by the end of it. And I went into this one, came out the most refreshed I've ever felt in my life. And that's because it was filled with a bunch of people who were very transparent about their faith, very transparent about their doubts, and said they called a spade a spade. And that was something I wasn't used to. And from that point on, I knew I needed to find a way to write for these people because I loved it so much. And so they gave me an opportunity. And the first thing that came to my mind was, well, hell, I should just write about horror films. I love them. You know, maybe I can find theological kind of touch points to talk about. And so I wrote a series called In the Event of a Cosmic Horror. And I largely based it off a book by I believe he's a nihilist, Eugene Thacker, the book In the Dust of the Planet, which you might know from fashion design. People like Kanye and people like that wear shirts with that book title on them. So I read that book and I was just blown away by it. And I kind of used some of his ideas as starting points. And so I talked about Revelation. I talked about the hiddenness of the world and Lovecraft and how Lovecraft actually understood the limits of human understanding and the other the other side that we can't quite grasp. And just a lot of stuff going on in my mind, a lot of development in how I view horror. And so I wrote that series, and that kind of just started it off. I started thinking a lot more about horror, but recently I started my own website, just as a way to kind of combine all the writings I've done in a lot of places, put them in one place, the podcasts I do. That way, I can have a page that people go to and be like, here's your stuff. Okay.
I'm attempting to do that. I haven't.
Yeah, I understand.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, I understand. So, so with that, I was like, well, I'm going to start blogging again, because I had a Tumblr for a long time, and I would blog quite a bit up until the last couple of years. Kind of fell away from it because I got busy and a few personal things going on. So I was like, well, I had a friend, Jeff Warwick, who does The Smell of Music with me, and he was like, dude, like, what you write about horror is what you love to write about. I can tell when I read your stuff, and you should really start focusing in more on that stuff. And so I've kind of downgraded a lot of things that I've been doing lately, and I'm kind of concentrating on honing my skill as far as writing about horror. And I don't necessarily want to force a Christian perspective on the films,
right.
but if I see kind of pathways, I'm going to mention them, because I'm not ashamed of my faith. And I think there's ways that I can write about it that's not preachy, that can mean something to people regardless of what their beliefs are. So that's kind of how I approached it.
Well, let's talk about Martyrs a little bit, because I mean, there's the name Martyrs, right? And so that's very much, they are very if I actually have a book called what's it called? I don't know, a Book of Martyrs. It's like a gigantic book that has all these stories of all these martyrs from like through the Gospels or through the New Testament.
Fox's Book of Martyrs?
I think so. It's like a gigantic book.
That's the most famous.
It's amazing. It's incredible. By the way,
it is
one of my favorite things that I own. So, but Martyrs, I never thought about when I saw the movie. I mean, there was some symbology, especially at the end,
yes.
Right? With her kind of being put up in like almost a crucifix pose. If I'm I'm remembering that right. It's been a while since I've seen it. So there is that, but I didn't really, overtly think of any, possible religious undertone. So what was it that kind of, I guess, what were you latching onto when you saw the film? Was it on your first viewing of the film, or was it kind of like subsequent viewings? You were like, whoa, there's stuff we can unpack here.
Weirdly enough, it's usually when I actually am watching the film, I'm not thinking through it. I'm trying to just take in the film and appreciate it for what it is. I think a lot of people that in my camp would constantly try to analyze it within, a Christian text in order to kind of put a gospel spin on it. And part of me is I just want to watch it and appreciate it for the art that it is. And then as I kind of dwell on it for like a few days afterwards, I start kind of piecing things together and like, what it has to say about the world of the movie and how that world of the movie relates to the world we all know. And so in my mind, the ending is so fatalistic, so nihilistic.
Yeah. There may be spoilers for Martyrs, everyone, from here on out.
Exactly.
So, if you haven't seen 2008's Martyrs, pause it, watch it, and come back. If you don't care about spoilers, you've been warned. There we go. We go. Covered our tracks here.
There you go. Nicely done. So, at the end, you have the final reveal. The martyr who is able to have the divine gaze, as I called it. She was able to see into the other side, and she was the only one that they had found, that this organization, this secret, like, kind of conspiracy theory organization that the director developed for the story. It's the only one they had found that was able to communicate what she had seen. And it was whatever it was, and we don't know the content of the revelation, but whatever it was caused the person who heard it to kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And her famous last line is to the, she's talking to her assistant, I believe, and she's like, "Have you ever wondered what the afterlife is like?" The guy's like, "Yes, I have." And she's like, "Well, keep doubting," or I think she says, "Keep doubting," or "Keep searching," or something like that. And then she pulls the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, like, okay, you could take that as kind of a nihilist approach. She could have just, maybe the martyr told her that there's nothing. There's no afterlife. And therefore, everything that we do, everything we are, humanity is meaningless ultimately, and we just end up being dirt and nothing more. Okay, that's a possibility. But I'm thinking to myself, within my worldview, I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, okay, well, let's say that this is actually happening in this world. Like, one of the aspects of the Bible is the kind of the dark underbelly of it is that God does harden hearts. He does give to people the desires that they want, and it's not good for them, but that they really want it, and so he gives it to them. And in my mind, maybe this organization that is destroying these female bodies, these innocent women, to build their Tower of Babel to this knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
God's saying, "Okay, this is what you want, so I'm gonna give you over to it." And so he gives them what they want. And the ending is, if man is trying to reach heaven on their own willpower, it's futile.
Mm-hmm.
It's nihilist. It's nihilism, because you can't do it, at least according to the Gospels. So that's kind of where I went from, and I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting study of how God reveals himself to us. There's a positive and negative aspect to it. And so as I wrote the piece, I was trying to keep that in tension, because you can go to the extremes on both sides. Like, you can kind of, there's been a history of negative and positive theology through Christian tradition. Mm-hmm. And there have been problems if they've gone to the extreme on either side. And so I kept that in tension. I was like, well, so what does this mean? Like, what's the point of this movie within that system? If this is true, if there was actual content to Revelation that the martyr gave the woman, then what would that content be, and why would it cause the woman to kill herself?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just presupposing that there was some kind of content, that there was an afterlife of some sort, because there's little notes in the movie that kind of lead you to believe that there's something there. And so I was like, well, okay, if there is a God, and he does not like seeing his creatures being, brutalized and violated and, tortured, mm-hmm. so forth and so on, how would his justice be done? And that was one of the ideas I came up with, is that he revealed to them the end of their goal. And that caused despair. And so that's kind of where I ended up on the essay. It's not a very happy essay.
Yeah.
But, it's whenever you have torture and brutality and all this stuff, like, it's not going to be happy.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing happy going on here. And so a lot of it's speculative, of course. Mm-hmm. But that's one reading that you could possibly take. Now, admittedly, I try not to be that speculative, if I can help it. But that was just so compelling to me that I was like, I'm going with it, and critics be damned.
It's one of those films that I think does leave a lot up to the audience to fill in the puzzle, to fill in the pieces, and fill in the blanks. So, yeah, I mean, what's been the reaction to? Have you gotten like any feedback from other Christians and things like that, who've stumbled across this piece that you've written, or what's been the reaction to this?
Reaction on the whole, most of the people who have read my piece that are Christians have said like that's a very intriguing approach to the film. It's not one that they would watch, and I completely understand. Like I have a hard time recommending that movie just because it's so rough, it's so harsh, and it's so depressing. And it's very violent, and it's especially in this current climate of rape culture and just abuse of women and so forth. It's rough. It's a bitter dose of truth, I think, and so I wouldn't recommend it to people unless they just are compelled to watch it.
Yeah, it's one of those films.
So,
I mean, I remember when I first saw it, I was I couldn't go to bed. I saw it pretty late, so I stayed up a little longer and tried to watch something a little happier. But it is a compelling film, and for me, it was there was a time when I was starting to jump into more horror movies, and it opened me up to. I think it was the first movie I saw with this French kind of new wave of horror, but then I saw High Tension and stuff like that. But I think out of all those films, I think it's the most compelling, I think, thematically.
Yes.
But now, is there different ways to interpret what a martyr is? Because for me, I always thought like a martyr is somebody who dies for their faith, right? But they're not necessarily put in that scenario in that film.
No.
They're more of... so is there different, definitions of martyr?
Well, I think any kind of definition ultimately derives from the religious definition.
Is it kind of in the context of this film, what they're trying to do?
Yes. So I think the key to reading the title into the film is the moment when I believe it's Anna is the girl that ends up being the martyr. She gives herself over to the persecution.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's at that point when she willingly takes on the persecution and the death and the torture, and she just gives herself to it. She leans into it, and at that point, I think she's a true martyr. Now, there's a lot of gray areas to the true like the Christian definition of martyr is someone who dies for the faith, like who is unfairly, unjustly killed because of their beliefs.
I mean, that's the context I've heard it filmed with my upbringing.
Yes, exactly. And so, what is the content of her, belief going into that persecution and giving herself to it? I don't know. Then but I think that's an interesting kind of title. I think that's the reason why he titled it that, is to bring in the religious heft of the term, and to ask those questions. What is it in this situation that defines a martyr, and why is this one girl, this one woman, the one who is ultimately able to reveal the content of the revelation?
Right.
So, that's a good film. That's a film that brings in, hefty themes, hefty definitions, and yet is still ambiguous enough to allow for the audience to live in the text.
Yeah.
Of the movie. So,
out of the three films you have up there so far, I think this one's the meatiest one. I think.
Yes, I think so.
As far as that goes, you just posted about The Final Girls. I haven't watched that yet.
Yes.
So I'm excited to watch it because I think
It's a fun movie.
I think we're actually going to be talking to the filmmakers at some point this week for
really?
the screencast. So
Very cool. Very cool. I'll look forward to that.
Cross-pollinate the podcasts. If you haven't heard of the screencast, I'm also doing that. Anyway, but you talk about, then you have another writing about the nightmare, that kind of pseudo documentary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, it was kind of a I didn't really like it. It was kind of a boring, it kind of was very repetitive with the subject matter about these people who kind of get these, not necessarily night terrors, but have these like, I guess night terrors, right?
Night terrors, hallucinations, whatever you want to call it.
But my co-host for the Screamcast, he said the movie was okay, but it really, he couldn't shake the fact, because he used to have kind of these similar, things happen to him.
Okay.
When he was younger. So I think in that sense, there's something there with this kind of pseudo documentary thing. It's the people who did the Room. It's about
237.
237.
Yes.
That was kind of a pseudo documentary as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know what's true and what's not in this one, which makes it a little bit frustrating. But I think the subject matter could be is very intriguing. I think I felt like they kind of botched the execution.
Yes, I would agree. Agree.
What was it about this film? Because you say that too in your write up, that you're kind of mixed on the film itself. But what was it that stood out for to be analyzed, I guess?
Well, this was one of those situations where it was the right film at the right time.
Okay.
I had already been contemplating writing something about the nature of experience, of human experience, and the seriousness of human experience to that person. Regardless of if we believe the person's story or their experience or not, that's one side of the issue. The other side is if they're being honest about it, that experience is objective to their worldview. That's objective to who they are as a person and how they see the world. So regardless if I believe any of the people on the nightmare actually had those experiences or not, it's real to them if they're being honest. And so I had been, contemplating that because, as a Christian, I kind of go back and forth on, what aspects of the supernatural do I believe in? Like, is it more distraction? Like, is it, there's a concept out there, like a lot of Christian apologists will say that a lot of the supernatural aspects will be just like demonic distraction.
Right.
So it's like the devil saying, like, here, like, I'm going to do this so that your attention will be taken away from the actual truth of the matter. So that's one way of looking at it. As I write in that piece, I've had experiences myself with very strange stuff that I can't fully explain, either rationally or supernaturally. So I'm not sure where I kind of stand on that issue, but I do know that people base a lot of their life and their beliefs and the way they view the world on their experiences, and we have to take that seriously as people. Not just as a Christian, like not just as an atheist, like as a human being, you need to hear people out and to take them seriously. And until there's a red flag that shoots up, we need to take them at their word and take that seriously. And so I had been thinking about that as is, and just the nature of, the objectivity of subjective human experience, which is humorous when you think about it. But, and I saw that film and I was like, well, I didn't really care for the film, but it did affect me.
Right.
Like, I was still kind of like looking over my shoulder at the end of it. I was like, it's a little weird, And I was like, well, there's something there, like something impacted me. What was it? And I think it's the what if question. Like, what if these people's experiences are true? what does that say for me? What does that say? How does that speak into my belief system, speak into my world? And what do I do with that? And so I don't know any of those people, so I can't, honestly take them at their word. As we know with documentaries, there's a lot of gray area as to what's real and what's not.
You can really. It's all about the editing. With documentaries,
exactly.
You can really like I said, like anybody can form an argument for any position.
Exactly.
With a documentary, it's the same sort of thing. It's really all about how you edit things, what information you put in, what information you leave out.
But I think the part that really got me is the one woman who had those experiences. She spoke the word of Christ, and it was powerful enough in the moment when she was serious. She wasn't a believer at that point, if we're to believe her story. She spoke it, and it stopped. And she became a Christian after that. I'm like, so even if what she experienced was not real, at least not real in the way she says it is, the experience itself had power over her shifting paradigms.
Well, it changed her entire worldview.
Exactly. So, like, we have to deal with that. Like, what does that mean? And so that's kind of where I was going. I think I'll probably dig into a little bit deeper later on than I did on this, because I was trying to keep it fairly short. I try to keep them readable length. So I think it's an interesting subject, and I'm all for respecting people enough to take them at their word.
Cool.
And to hear them out. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that one. Anyways.
Cool, man. Well, since I haven't seen Final Girls, I'm not going to jump into it because I don't want to be spoiled.
I understand.
But anyway, everyone, you can go to BlakeICollier.com, and I'll put links in the show notes to that website, and check these out. Share them. I think they're great, and that's we're trying to get writers, and everything for the Screamcast.com, and I respond more to, I think, analysis of film and a different perspective rather than just a straight up review of a film. Because I was just talking to our writer Josh Obershaw, who's been writing stuff, and he's kind of approaching things that way, which is great.
That's awesome.
More of an analysis, and then seeing yours with kind of like a Christian leaning towards it was really, I think, for me, I'm not sure about my co-host Brad or whatever.
Yeah.
But for me,
exactly.
like, I'm like, oh, these are awesome. Like, this is a great different perspective on horror flicks. So I say keep it up, man. I think you're onto something.
I appreciate that.
It's a good thing. So everyone go over there, check out his writings and everything. And where can people find you online other than the website?
The website. You can find me on Twitter at Sacred Letdown, and you'll see my name is the Dirty Deacon, which was given to me by my Barnes & Noble coworkers.
That's awesome.
Because they had never met a guy who came from a college ministry job to Barnes & Noble and liked hip-hop, cussed as much as I did, and watched horror films. So
nice.
That's what they nicknamed me as.
It's fantastic.
And then you can find me on Facebook, BlakeICollier.com, or
cool.
Blake I. Collier.
Cool, man. Well, I'm excited to finally talk to you. We've been going back and forth and everything, and it's good to have a conversation for sure. So wish you all the best with everything, and I'll be retweeting and sharing your posts for sure.
I certainly appreciate that, man.
Cool.
And anything I can do for the Screamcast or AxPx, let me know. I'll be glad to do it.
Awesome. That may happen.
Okay.
I want to get some stuff up on the AxPx. I need some writings up there, so definitely keep you in mind.
Awesome.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on the show, and we will be in touch for sure.
Sounds good, man.
Cool.
Thank you.
Break my bones. All machines making us programmable. lost my eyes, I chopped my teeth. All machines turning us into machines. Copycats have killed the scene. Off with their heads, off with these beds. Our machines turning us into machines.
That was the Cordova Academy Glee Club with the song Amplified Savior off of their 2008 album Be Mine or There Will Be War. It's a kick-ass album and something if you're interested, if you like that song, you definitely should check it out. I want to thank Blake for coming on the show and being the first guest on season 3 of the AxPx podcast. I like the season thing, so I'm going to keep that going. So, not sure how I'll work the seasons. I know with this type of thing, I will need some time to kind of recalibrate and get new guests on. So I'm thinking, maybe October to October, something like that, with like a month off somewhere in there. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know. I haven't really thought this through. I'm kind of just keeping this going by the seat of my pants. Hope you guys dig the new intro and everything. I have a new logo being workshopped. So we'll see how that goes. I think my original idea was super busy, but I'm hoping my friend Kevin Spencer reins everything in and makes it look awesome. So I'll be debuting that hopefully soon within the next few shows. If you want to contact the show, drop me a line via the website. Go to theaxpx.com. There should be a contact link. And, the website, it was down for a while. I couldn't even edit the damn thing. But try to contact me through there. If not, I believe my email is sean@theaxpx.com. I'll be ironing all this stuff out. The easiest way to get a hold of me is on Twitter. And the Twitter handle is do you say handle? The Twitter name, whatever, is the AxPx. And if you go to Facebook, actually go to theaxpx.com. I got all the links to all the social media up there. I don't use Google+, gonna be taking that shit down. And we were posting the shows on YouTube. If I find an easier way to do that, I'll probably keep doing that because that seemed to do well. I don't know. For some reason, people listen to podcasts on YouTube. Who'd have thunk it? But you can go to facebook.com/theaxpx and get a hold of me there as well. As I work out all the, kind of get my mind thinking this way again and ironing out a bunch of bugs, we'll be back in full force. If you're interested in writing for the AxPx.com, if you're someone who wants to, has stuff you want to write about, definitely drop me a line. We're definitely looking for writers for the site. So that's all the house cleaning I have. Hope you guys really dug the show, and I'm excited to be bringing this back, and excited about the next few guests we have. Definitely, since we're still in October, and I hope to do this every October. Kind of focus on more of the supernatural and things like that, horror movies and stuff like that. But we have a paranormal researcher or paranormal investigator, I'm not sure, ghost hunter, whatever, on the show next week. So I'm super excited to talk to him. Otherwise, all of you guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
We must search for what is truth.
What is truth? And what is God?
You don't really want an answer to that question.
The first duty is to the truth, whether it's scientific truth or historical truth or personal truth.
That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you're a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are, just by being alive.